I'll make this as painless as possible. And please carry on eating. We had thought that Dr. Belusa would be here to give this update on what's happening with the Paul's Gist initiative, but unfortunately he's not very well at the moment. But as a quick aside before I start my update, just to let you know, from our resident farmer, anybody who wants to get this udderly cream, the only place to get it is not just on the internet. If you go to any farm shop, not the ones that are selling their produce particularly, but these Great Western Farmers and those sorts of places, apparently they all sell udderly cream. So if you take a trip out in the countryside one day.
I just did a look on Amazon. They sell it on Amazon in different size tubs. So if they register on easyfundraising.com, then they can actually raise.
See, there's always an angle on it, isn't there? There is always an angle. Right, right, to move on then. Do you all, or are you all in this room familiar with Paul's Gist by now? Anybody not familiar with what Paul's Gist is about? Good, that means I could skip through the first bits very swiftly. So, in terms of an update, obviously, you know what we're about. We're about setting up a clinic for the element of GIST where there currently aren't any sort of recognised treatments, and so that's for wild-type GIST patients, and obviously the paediatric and adolescent patients who are most generally wild-type patients as well. Progress made since I last reported in April this year. Our fund, in terms of the fundraising that we've done, and all, you know, anybody that's had a mind to try and assist in our progress has helped us to raise funds, and we're just around about the £60,000 mark that we've actually raised now. And in terms of the types of activities we've been involved in to try and move this forward, a lot of the things that we need in place to have the clinic, as a byproduct, they tend to be things that GIST patients as a whole would need as facilities within the UK to be able to get a better service in the long run. So it's been recognised that there's a thing called specialist commissioning status within the NHS, and if a disease group has that status, it means there's kind of a recognised way of caring for them within the medical system that we operate under. And to have some influence on and have a say, I suppose, in what happens with that. As you're probably all aware, there's been some fairly significant reorganisation going on in the NHS over the last couple of years, and they recently put out calls for people to be appointed as patient advocates on a number of clinical reference groups, as they're called. Both Barbara and I applied to join the sarcoma clinical reference group. They appointed for England 4 patient advocates. Barbara was appointed to that group, thank goodness. Barbara was appointed to... Feeling a bit wounded because I hadn't been selected. I thought I'll have another go, so I applied for the Children and Adolescent Cancers clinical reference group, and yippee, I was appointed. So the commitment is 2 years of obviously participating in meetings where decisions are taken about the levels of care. You know, are we getting sufficient recognition, and are there things in place for the care of the groups that we represent? Along the way, obviously the gentleman who we originally engaged with to try and get specialist commissioning status, when we first approached him, it was with a Paul's Gist thing in our head, but it was concluded, because overall our patient group is not that big, that really we should be talking about specialist commissioning status for GIST as a whole, incorporating Paul's Gist. That conversation started with a gentleman called Professor Sir Mike Richards, who you might have seen on television because he's now the person responsible for improving the quality of care in hospitals. And his responsibilities from a cancer commissioning point of view transferred to a gentleman called Sean Duffy. Although, you know, we started this process 2 years ago, and it hasn't really gone, it's gone round in sort of circles. So we're actually starting the process again, really, with Sean Duffy in our meetings at the beginning of November. Sorry?
It's now called highly specialised.
Oh yeah, highly specialised. Obviously, we've been talking about the fact that we've got ethics approval for a national GIST tumour bank, and trying to figure out the best way to actually make sure everybody knows about it. And we have sure everybody knows about protocol now, a written one about how people would engage with the tumour bank to get their samples sent there. But making sure all the hospitals that are doing these operations are aware of it. We were a bit stuck for a while to figure out what to do, but we were fortunate to be invited to, there's a group called the Genetics Alliance. They are a charity dealing with patients with rare genetic diseases, but they're really proactive in terms of their sort of rare patient groups, and they've also set up a division called Rare Diseases UK. And their director, Alistair Kent, he's a very articulate and very nice man, and he's obviously quite involved at a senior level with decision makers in both European and UK health service. So having sort of engaged with him, he's helped us, first of all, by inviting us to their annual general meeting, where we were present when there was a lecture much like today of the various specialists from a gentleman called Jeremy Rashbash, and he's responsible for all the registries, the cancer registries in England. And so the connection was made that potentially his registry information, because apparently it holds the details of every operation that happens in the UK or in England, and he interconnects with the registries in Scotland and Wales and Ireland. So potentially there's a mechanism there for us to make sure that our information about our tumour bank could potentially go through to the right people, could potentially go. Our involvement with that group as well has facilitated an invitation which happened yesterday to this initial stakeholder meeting. Have any of you heard about the 100,000 Genomes project, which is this big thing that the government are launching to sequence the genomes of 100,000 patients within England? They've set up a company called Genomics England, and I was fortunate enough to be able to go to this meeting yesterday morning, and you know, it has sort of facilitated another potential thought that if we're going to have our tumour bank open and collect samples, then we do need to make sure that the information that we collect with those samples is compatible with what this programme of work would need, because we don't want to collect it and then find 2 years down the line it can't be used by the 100,000 Genomes project. So, you know, it does seem like it takes a long time to get these things going, but hopefully through time we're doing it in a fashion that means it will be useful on multiple levels, not just for research, you know, biological research, but also from the genomic sequencing point of view. Right, I'll try and speed it up now. In terms of Paul's GIST clinic, we finally managed to agree some copy for our Paul's GIST website, and we're in the process of just polishing that up before we make it live and everybody can see it. And it has been sort of announced publicly, or Dr. Belusu was interviewed, or Dr. who published a story about the fact we're going to have this clinic starting in 2014, and as a result of that publication, I think he's now getting a lot of requests to say, you know, actually, what's the date, when's it going to happen, etc. So hopefully we'll have that information soon. The sorts of things as spin-offs as well that have occurred in relation to the Paul's GIST clinic. Obviously, there are drugs that aren't currently accessible but have shown potential benefit for wild-type patients. For example, a drug called vandetanib and lincitinib. And we have very recently engaged with the people responsible for these drugs, and so Dr. Belusu is in a dialogue with them about how potentially they might be available to our patients, but obviously it's the very earliest stages, and rather like Charlotte Benson said earlier, we're asking that question whether or not it will percolate through to be able to access them. We don't know yet, but obviously we're going to try. In terms of how we've managed to get to our fundraising targets so far, a very active and participating family are the McCarthys. This year, this is a recent event of theirs. They did, I think it was it 11 of you? Did the London to Brighton cycle ride. I'm not sure what the quickest or the slowest times were, but this is a photograph. It's not a very big photograph, obviously, but that's the team there. And they've raised so far £4,062, which is a brilliant effort. £2. Thank you. Thank you very much. And prior to that, they'd raised nearly £1,000 from a very upmarket sort of cake sale. They set up like a pop-up, very posh cake stall in the Marylebone sort of carnival, and as I say, raised nearly £1,000 from selling tea and cake. So another brilliant job. We had a Paul's Gist summer party just local to Bristol where I live, and it rained, and you know, on the barbecue and all that sort of stuff, but we still had a good time. And one of our local Gist patients came with a whole gang of friends, and they said they'd been out all day and they were a bit tired. It was Nick Puntis, who's one of our trustees. And you know, when were we going to do the raffle, because they felt they needed to go home now because they wanted to go to sleep. And then they swept the board with the raffle prizes. There were, I think there were 9 of them, and they all won a prize, and his wife won too. So you know, it was worth staying for. Other sorts of donations. I've got Kim's Dig. My neighbour has 2 Jack Russells, and they went down a pipe somewhere, some fields away from our house. And I don't know how it happened, but they ended up about 6 or 7 feet below ground, trapped. And my husband dug for 7 hours to get them out. And obviously the owner was very grateful, but next day she came around with a cheque for £250 that she donated to Paul's Gist to thank him for all his efforts. So, you know, well, by one way or another, that's how we've been raising funds. Obviously ongoing collection via local shops. You know, people have them in their cafes and in the post office and that type of thing. It's amazing how much you can raise just you just have to have something there for people to, a receptacle for them to put the money in. And obviously we've started ink cartridge collection for both Gist Support UK and Paul's Gist. I don't know if all of you have seen the latest Gist Support UK newsletter. Obviously the colours and everything are the same as our previous one, but obviously the information is very different from what there was before. So if you haven't seen one, you might like to take one when you go. There's a pile outside. And other activities, we've already mentioned that we went to the ECHO conference, which is European Cancer Conference, effectively. 18,000 oncologists from all over Europe there to learn, to network, to find out about new things at the cutting edge, which hopefully will benefit patients across the board with cancer. And as I say, HIFU, sometimes these things happen, you don't know how they happen or why they happen, but it's brilliant that they do. I was anticipating perhaps being the first to talk about HIFU today, but we've had an expert talk on it, so that's brilliant. We also came across at the ECHO conference, they had a symposium by the company Bayer, and they had the top specialists from Italy, from Germany, and they had a gentleman, George Dimitri from America, whose name is just sort of meteoric in Gist circles. And then they had this other gentleman who really none of us had ever seen before from Mallorca in Spain, and he's the Spanish Gist specialist. And it seems his research focus is, wild-type Gist, and he tells me that in his patient population, the wild-type Gist patients form 25% of the patients, so quite a significant number. So obviously we're delighted to have met him and hoping that we can sort of engage with him a bit further. And that's it really from that slide. Looking forward, obviously we're hoping to meet with the new commissioner of the sarcoma CRG, and Anthony Purdow, who we've spoken to but not met yet, and obviously Sean Duffy, finalising the website. So I'll send out a message to everyone when it's available and it's got all the relevant information for the Paul's Gist Clinic on the new website. We're finalising the clinic format and processes. I mean, because we've been talking about it for so long, you think, well, haven't they got that sorted yet? But obviously, this is the first time anything of this type has really happened in the UK, and we just need to make sure that everything joins up so that when patients are engaged properly, they're not suddenly sort of left in a gaping hole. So we've just got to make sure all our documentation and links make sense. And because it's not anybody's full-time job, it's something that we're trying to do in amongst all our standard day-to-day activities, and the same with Dr. Belusu. I mean, he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart, frankly. So, you know, we have to take it on the chin when it doesn't always happen as quickly as we'd like it to. So, in terms of Paul's gist, that's an update, that's where we are, and thank you very much for the update, that's where we are.